If you've been following my channel, you know that I love both horror and comedy. I mean, who doesn't? But the key element to making either one work is timing.
Tales from the Crypt.
Today I'm going to talk about Tales from the Crypt. Much like a lot of shit that I like, Tales from the Crypt seems to be forgotten by time. Outside of Gen Xers and older millennials, nobody ever talks about this show. And that's a damn shame, because this show is ambitious beyond its years. The show is an anthology horror series based on the comic Tales from the Crypt, as well as other EC Comics publications from the 1950s. Most episodes were horror-themed, but it would also delve into action, science fiction, and in one case, historical fiction. Every episode was presented by its ghoulish host, the Crypt Keeper, a puppet who would sit around making stupid puns and doing ghoulish things. Some of his puns make no sense whatsoever.
Doc, I'm losing my mind. I can't seem to take a joke anymore. I'm in a choke.
He would open by presenting the episode and would close by making some sort of backhanded comment at the characters within it. Seriously, he gets on my nerves when I binge this show. Tales from the Crypt boasts one of the most memorable opening sequences in television history, and I'm not gonna really gush on it right now, but this gives me goosebumps whenever I see it. HBO had a powerhouse team of producers behind the show, consisting of directors Richard Donner, David Giller, Walter Hill, Joel Silver, and Robert Zemeckis. Tales from the Crypt would also feature some high-profile directors and writers working on various episodes. Most noteworthy, episodes most of the time featured name-brand actors in them, which at this point in time was not a common occurrence on a cable program. Actors such as Christopher Reeve, Judd Nelson, Tim Roth, Joe Pesci, Dan Aykroyd, the legendary Kirk Douglas, Leah I'm Gonna Come in My Fucking Pants Thompson, Patricia oh fuck there it goes again Arquette, Beverly oh my god I just did this 3 times D'Angelo, the best James Bond in the world Timothy Dalton, and Brad Pitt. It also featured actors jumping in for cameos while directing episodes, such as Arnold Schwarzenegger and Tom Hanks. The majority of episodes usually follow a character of varying disposition in some sort of situation. Many times, there's someone who does something bad for their own personal gain, and it comes back later in an ironic twist to bite them in the ass. That's not every single episode, but it is a fair amount. Tales from the Crypt was a violent, sleazy, sex-filled, late-night cable TV show, and I loved every second of it. So we're going to talk about my top 12 favorite Tales from the Crypt episodes. Why top 12? Because I'm an indecisive man-child. Split Second, the 11th episode of Season 3. Split Second follows Liz, a barmaid who one night gets harassed by a guy and is rescued by lumber mill owner Steve Dixon, played by Brian James. And hey, they get married after this incident. Liz moves into the mill with Steve, and at first things are happy, until it turns out Steve is very violently overprotective of his wife and doesn't like her being around the other men in the lumberyard. Especially since pretty much every guy in the small town has stuck it in Liz at one point or another.
Sub lady, she used to sell a mouth for a nickel. Something on your mind?
I didn't say nothing.
That's good. I thought I heard somebody say my wife sucked cock.
Leon from Blade Runner's not too happy about this, and gives an ultimatum to his men.
Nobody cares about my wife.
In the meantime, Liz has clearly become bored with her marriage. And to make matters worse, a hot young stud named Ted...
Where's that corkscrew, that fancy corkscrew for the wine bottle? Ted?
shows up for work at the lumber mill and catches Liz's eye. Liz immediately attempts to seduce Ted with her gross-ass pepperoni nipples. Most disappointing nude scene in the series. While Ted turns her down, Steve gets suspicious that somebody from the mill is fucking Liz. This causes Ted to freak out and decide, hey, fuck it, I'm just gonna run away. Liz returns and they have hot, early 90s cable sex. Sadly, Steve walks in on them and we find out Liz is a lying cunt.
You son of a bitch!
He forced me! He made me!
she's lying, Mr. Dixon.
I won't give away the ending, but Split Second has everything a Tales from the Crypt episode needs to be considered top tier. It's got that right balance of 90s cable sleaze and pulp comic sleaze with some comedy thrown in. Has a great cast and is directed by the guy who directed Highlander, one of my favorite movies. I highly recommend you check this one out, but on to number 11. Only Sindeep, the second episode of Season 1. The episode follows Leah Thompson as a common streetwalker who yearns for a better life, often fantasizing about attending high-end social events with Wall Street millionaires. She decides that the best course of action is to lure her pimp and rob him at gunpoint in what is one of the most unintentionally hilarious moments in the show.
Oh, baby, not the watch, please.
What is this? Let's make a fucking deal? Give me the watch! Or don't you see where I'm at?
Yeah, I see where you're at. Here. Just be cool.
The next day, she goes to a pawn shop to hawk the jewelry, and what do you know, it's too hot. But the pawn shop owner offers her another way to get some money. And honestly, this clip should be a React GIF, it's so perfect. The pawn shop owner offers to buy her beauty, but warns her if she ever wants it back, she has to come back within 4 months to repurchase it. Leah Thompson believes that all he's doing is taking a plaster mold, but little does she know there's some weird voodoo magic shit at hand.
Fucking voodoo magic, man.
With her new money, we get a cute 80s style fashion montage. Sadly, there's no nudity, and Leah Thompson attends a ball of some sort. And like any self-respecting hot chick, she decides to attach herself to the richest guy in the room, and they end up living happily ever after. Until 4 months later, poor Leah Thompson notices her looks are starting to go. In real life, this would not happen until the 2000s. This episode is probably the perfect starter episode of Tales from the Crypt. It's a perfect example of what the show is all about, and how they take an actor and pretty much build a whole story around them. And Leah Thompson is great. I specifically love her New York accent.
You got to be crazy.
Give me the fucking jewelry, man!
Yeah. Aside from Leah Thompson in the lead, the story itself is very solid. It's your typical Tales from the Crypt episode, with a solid ironic twist that I'm not gonna give away. It's my favorite episode of the first season, but not my favorite of the series, hence why there are 10 more episodes to go. Top Billing, the 5th episode of Season 3, follows Barry, played by Jon Lovitz, a struggling actor who can't get any roles because he doesn't have the look. And oh my god, is this the story of Jon Lovitz's career after he left SNL?
I don't have any money, I haven't eaten in a week, and I need this fucking job!
Following the failed audition, he meets a former colleague and roommate who has become more successful as an actor than him.
Hey, remember that rat hole we all lived in? Yeah, I sure do, we still live there.
Barry, being the pretentious snob that he is, refuses to do commercials to make money as he thinks he's a real actor, deciding to go for a community theater production of Hamlet. The humiliation conga continues as Barry's dropped by his agent and then comes home to find his longtime girlfriend is moving out on him to live with another man.
You're a loser.
It seems his girlfriend has had enough of Barry being a loser, and good on her.
We could still be friends.
Tales from the Cock.
You are a loser.
Barry goes to the audition and finds his ex-roommate there, who is also going to audition, in order to prove a point. The production staff is eccentric to say the least. Hi, John Astin. You can already tell there's something wrong with this picture. But hey, ex-roommate gets the part almost immediately. And why, you may ask?
He has the look.
At this point, Barry decides to take drastic action. What kind of action? Drastic action. What does he do? I don't know. Watch the episode and find out. Top Billing does a good job of making you root for the protagonist at first, but then in the end you're like, fuck that asshole, which is exactly what Hollywood thought when they cast Jon Lovitz in High School High. Top Billing is a perfect breather episode. If you've watched a more intense episode and it's bothered you, throw this on because this one's pretty funny. It's mean-spirited, but Jon Lovitz is great, and John Astin is a fucking national treasure. I hope he lives forever. Also, the guy on the left is really funny in this episode. I love how he's fucking moved to tears when they actually do the play. You're probably thinking, what episode could possibly be better than Top Billing? Well, there are 9 of them. Undertaking Power, the 9th episode of Season 3, is another fun romp episode. The episode follows a bunch of kids in a small town who are obsessed with horror movies, and honestly, this episode plays like a more adult version of The Goonies. It even has the kid who played Data in it. It also has Max Goof from the Goof Troop and Nog from Deep Space Nine. Oh, and a fat kid who never really did anything after this. One night, the kids break into a morgue to look at some dead bodies and end up running into the coroner, played by John Glover, who is a fucking maniac in this episode and is the highlight. The opening sequence where the kids are hiding in the room while John Glover just desecrates a corpse is fucking hilarious. You half expect him to get up and start banging the thing. I love how comfortable he is just eating after desecrating a corpse. So at one point, the fat kid almost gets the attention of the coroner, and the kids have to make sounds to kind of draw him away from where he is, and it's a fun little cat and mouse scene. This scene is not only great because of John Glover, but the child actors are really solid too. They do a great job building suspense during this scene, like you're worried these kids are gonna get caught, and they have a good payoff at the end too, with a double fake out. The kids manage to escape, except for Norm, who gets left behind, and while hiding, he stumbles upon a weird conspiracy between the coroner and an unknown party. I also realize I should be calling him the Mortician, but I'm too lazy to go back and fix it. The Mortician and the unknown party, who's revealed to be a pharmacist, have a scam going where the pharmacist prescribes the wrong medication to people so they die and the Mortician can collect funeral fees. Norm tells his friends about what he heard the next day, and they think he's just making shit up. However, their opinions change when they find out that Josh's dad died from bad asthma medication. Upon explaining to Josh what happens, the four get together with a camera and decide to find evidence against the Mortician to bring him to justice. The investigation part is just really fun, and I won't spoil it completely because this all builds to a very good climax. It's safe to say that everyone does their job in this episode. The kids are great, like they don't act like child actors, they act like fucking actors. And John Glover is, again, a national treasure, much like John Astin.
You're dead, you little son of a bitch!
Just want to say, this did found footage before it was cool. It's a fine example of a kid's fighting backstory, and that's what makes Undertaking Power so great. And now on to number 8. Hey, that rhymed. The 7th episode of the 4th season, titled The New Arrival, follows Dr. Allan Getz, played by David Warner. He portrays a child psychologist talk radio host who is snobbish and kind of a dick. Dr. Getz learns that his show is up for cancellation due to poor ratings, and in an attempt to boost the ratings, he makes a house call to a frequent caller, played by Zelda Rubinstein. You can just tell by the fact that Zelda Rubinstein lives in this house that there's some serious creepiness going on, and yeah, I'm gonna say it, this is probably the absolute creepiest episode on this list. We learn that Rubinstein has a large collection of child psychologist books, and sort of an obsession with child psychologists in general, including Dr. Getz's mentor. There's a nice little argument over whether or not people who don't have kids are fit to give advice on how to raise children. This is a valid point. We also learned that Rubinstein's husband died in World War II, so how could she have a young child? It should be noted that her kid is a fucking nightmare.
Please stop. Please stop for Mommy. Not in front of our guests, darling.
The crew finds that the house is just disgusting. There's gum all over the walls, and it's just really bad vibes. When the crew starts going through the house is when it gets really off the rails creepy, and it keeps you guessing until the very end. I gotta admit, when I first watched this episode, it fucking threw me for such a loop. Like, I know you're probably thinking the same thing that I was thinking when I first watched this episode, but let me tell you, that's not it. What The New Arrival lacks in comedy and gore, it makes up for in genuinely being creepy and having great camera and lights work. Like, I absolutely love all the angles and the shots they do. It's a work of brilliance. I chose to forego doing a synopsis of this episode and decided to gush over how well made it is. It was directed by Peter Medak, who previously did a Twilight Zone episode and would go on to do a Masters of Horror episode, making him the only director, to the best of my knowledge, that has done all three. The trifecta of anthology horror, if you will. Medak would later go on to do an episode of The Wire, as well as an episode of Breaking Bad. In fact, one of the greatest episodes of Breaking Bad, Peekaboo.
I
If you're in the mood to watch something spooky and want a mind-blowing twist, I suggest you check this one out. But for now, it's time to get on to number 7. The premiere episode of Season 5 features Edgley Jr. portraying a salesman who goes around being sleazy and conning people, and you can tell just by that intro that this is going to be a good one. His pitch revolves around preying on old, unsuspecting country people, telling them that he has a burial plot for them, and when he convinces them to buy in, he says that the plot may not be available, in order to get them to give him some cash in order to reserve it. And of course, Edgley Jr. runs off with the cash and never talks to them again. Following the introduction of his method, Edgley finds himself at a weird country house where he runs into a family that's played by all Tim Currys. Before I go further, I feel I should say I can't help but think that Capcom was inspired by the design of the Tim Currys for Resident Evil 7. Moving on. Edgley goes forth with his pitch, and the Tim Currys make it very clear that he's not welcome, as they've been swindled by salesmen before. Edgley doesn't let up, however, and he continues with his pitch. He finds out the hard way that they have no interest in his product when he finds the remains of the 2 previous salesmen that had bothered them. Edgley tries to make a hasty retreat, but he ends up getting conked out with a baseball bat for his trouble. And I just want to say, I'm sorry for this. He awakes hours later where he's introduced to the family's daughter, who is also played by Tim Curry. At this point, I feel I should mention that Tim Curry was nominated for an Emmy for this, and he deserves it. Edgley feigns interest in the daughter in order to save his ass, and this leads to what is probably the least attractive sex scene in the series. I mentioned Tim Curry got an Emmy nomination for this. I think Edgley should have got one too, because he was acting like he was pretending to enjoy fucking Tim Curry, and ugh. And before this goes any further, if you're expecting me to play a Rocky Horror Sweet Transvestite voice clip, you will not find that here. That joke is played out. Don't need to do it.
I'm just a sweet transvestite.
I'd pride myself on my integrity, but let's face it, I don't have any. Upon learning of the family's vast fortune from the daughter, Edgley decides to marry her in what can only be described as a shotgun wedding. Well, not really, there's no shotguns or force present, but anyway. The two live happily ever after. No, they don't. Edgley's just planning to figure out a way to steal the fortune from under their nose, and if you want to find out how it ends, go watch the episode yourself. It is an all-time classic. Tim Curry is great in this episode, and Edgley Jr. is really funny. He's that actor I always see in things, but I've never really appreciated him until recently. The scummy person out for money getting what he deserves isn't anything new for Tales from the Crypt. However, the production of this episode alone warrants it being on this list. I can't imagine how difficult it was to apply all that makeup to Tim Curry and then shoot all of his scenes separately. Bravo for that. Season 5 is the last all-around good season, and this episode is a big part of it. Before I move on to number 6, I'm going to show a clip of Edgley trying to pop a boner so he can fuck a Tim Curry.
Well, I'll be damned. I think you do love me.
The 6th episode of Season 4, titled What's Cooking, has an all-star cast, consisting of Christopher Reeve, some woman I've never heard of, the dad from The Blob, Judd Nelson, and Meatloaf. What's Cookin' follows Christopher Reeve's character Fred and his wife Irma as they run a squid-based restaurant that is struggling.
Honey, if you bury that thing in the back of my neck, you're just gonna wreck the blade.
Christopher Reeve is just so good at playing a small-town American boy, and that's probably why he got the role of Superman. In addition to Fred and Irma, the restaurant also employs Gaston, a local drifter kind of guy who is played by Judd Nelson. And he makes it pretty obvious that he's got a thing for Fred's wife.
What I can't figure out is what a classy lady like you is doing with a guy like him.
One night, after what can be assumed is months without paying rent, the landlord, Mr. Chumley, comes and tells Fred that he's evicted. Fred does not take this well.
You fat son of a bitch!
bitch!
In the midst of this rage, while trying to stop Mr. Chumley from exiting, Fred accidentally cuts him with a knife, and he's sure he's going away for a while. The argument outside is witnessed by Gaston from his stoop at the homeless shelter. What he planning? Fred tells his wife that they're probably losing the restaurant, but don't worry, he has a plan.
And we buy a whole ton of pork. Pork, it's the other white meat.
Oh, just shut up.
So the next day they open up the restaurant, and Fred's expecting to either be evicted or arrested or both. But the cop knows nothing about what happened the night before, and has only stopped in to get some breakfast. And much to Irma's surprise, there's some fresh steaks in the fridge, just sitting on top of the eggs, contaminating everything. The steaks are courtesy of Gaston, who has provided them as a favor to the restaurant. Fred asks Gaston how he got his hands on the steaks, only to find out that they aren't feeding people steaks, they're feeding people meatloaf. No, I wanted the slide whistle or the drumline thing to play, not the... Anyway, moving on. Fred is understandably horrified and disgusted at this, and can you blame him? Okay, yeah, we're doing the thing, we're editing fucks with me again? Okay, alright. So the restaurant starts serving human meat at the behest of Gaston, who killed Mr. Chumley, mind you. And hey, the restaurant becomes a major hit. Now, this is actually the most horrifying part of the episode. Imagine, like, you eat at some restaurant out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere and it's really good, only to find out later that they've been serving human. I don't know how I'd react if I found out a restaurant charged me for human meat. Like, I've been doing my own human meat for free. You can just go outside and get one. I mean, I've said too much. This is all part of Gaston's little power play. He tells Irma what's been happening, but makes it seem like Fred is the one who started killing people. Irma, understandably, is shocked. I mean, this is a long way to go to bang a chick. Bro, you're Judd Nelson. You probably stuck it in Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy. After telling Irma to have the sheriff come to the restaurant, Judd Nelson goes and tries to kill Fred in quote-unquote self-defense. A fight scene ensues, and how does it turn out? Well, find out when you watch the episode. What's Cooking is a prime example of a masterclass Tales from the Crypt episode. Great cast, it's not really scary, it's morbid, but it's also very funny and enjoyable. This episode really makes me feel sad about Christopher Reeve's accident and what happened to his career, because he is great in a leading role. You get this vibe watching him that he is probably genuinely a very nice guy, or well, he was. I almost wish I could put this episode up a little higher, but in my opinion there are 5 more episodes that beat it out. Cutting Cards, the 3rd episode of Season 2, is a true classic in the series. The episode follows a hardcore gambler named Reno, who is a little down on his luck after losing all of his money after a year in Vegas. Upon returning home, he goes straight for the casino. At the casino, he runs into his old rival Sam, and the two exchange harsh words and insults. The two play a game of dice against one another, where the loser would have to leave town forever. The game ends in a draw, as both of them score double sixes, and Reno starts to get very irritated and suggests something a little more irrational.
You wanna fuck with me? You want a duel? Alright, let's do it. Russian roulette.
Being what I can assume is somewhere in the Southwest, Sam has a big-ass revolver handy in his glove box. Reno loads the chamber, and the two go at it. Russian roulette, in and of itself, is a very tense situation, and this episode is no different. I love how they're just throwing insults and taunting each other throughout the entire ordeal. What makes Cutting Cards such a great episode is the absolutely dynamic chemistry between Lance Henriksen and Kevin Tighe. It should be considered a fucking felony that these two never did anything together after this, because they play off each other in a way that is comparable to the great comedic duos of film and television. Duos such as Abbott and Costello, Lucille Ball and Ricky Martin, Spade and Farley, Shore and Baldwin, McBride and Goggins, the list goes on. These two are as good as any of them. They keep building and building this tension as each of them takes their shot, and it's down to a point where there are only 2 chambers in the revolver left. And as the tension's at its peak, they decide to just break it, and this is perfect.
Hey, you want me to leave the keys in it?
Park it yourself, asshole! Who do you call an asshole?
You heard my friend. Get the hell out of here.
The fact that they hate each other, but Sam refers to Reno as my friend in this scene, makes me laugh. Sam takes his shot and the chamber's empty, which means that the only shot left is the fucking live bullet. And rather than just call it a loss and walk away, Reno decides to go out knowing full well that his brains are gonna get splatted.
God. A gun?
Reno's legitimately upset because the guy had no chance of getting killed even though it saved his life. It's fascinating.
Maybe it got wet. Ah, you can't.
At this point, the two gamblers come to the conclusion that the only logical way to finish this is a game of chop poker. Basically, they play poker, and whoever loses a hand loses a finger. The way Kevin Ty sells his fingers getting cut off is priceless. Cutting Cards is another episode I would recommend if you're new to the series and are looking for a good starting point. Other than that, I've pretty much mentioned all the reasons why this is on the list in my previous statements, so let's move on to number 4. The first episode of the 3rd season, titled The Trap, follows Lou Paloma, an abusive husband and all-around dick.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Clean up this fucking mess!
Lou comes home one day to inform his wife that he's been laid off from his job, and it's pretty much established that the two already have some pretty bad financial issues. But Lou has a plan. Lou's plan is to fake his death and have his wife collect the insurance money. Lou plans on doing this by using his brother, who is a coroner, to help fabricate the entire ordeal. Lou and his brother don't have the greatest of relationships. You can tell they don't like each other. Oh, and Lou's wife wants to fuck his brother. The plan is to make it look like Lou was killed in a burglary gone wrong. This is all set up with his brother Billy using his coroner skills. Cops would be called, death certificate would be filed, wife would get insurance money. Simple, right? In order to make it look legit, Lou needs to be rendered unconscious. Lou offers his wife the chance to do it in order to get back at him for all the times that he smacked her around. But when she can't bring herself to do it, Lou drops this bombshell.
My best friend?
Yeah, your best friend. I must have fucked her for all, jeez.
When his wife is incapable of rendering him unconscious, Billy decides to take matters into his own hands, being irritated with the way Lou treats his wife. The police are called, the report is filed, and everything goes off without a hitch. But what's she plotting? Mother Paloma is understandably distraught at the funeral, so they take her out of the room, and at this point in time, Billy and Lou's wife start to fuck on top of his casket while he's still alive. Tales from the cock! Honestly, it could have been a satisfying ending if the coffin just went to the cremator while he was still alive and his wife was getting fucked on top of it, but they take it a step further. They're interrupted before they can fuck further, and they decide that Lou is gonna go to Brazil first and wait for his wife, so as not to arouse suspicion. Lou gets some plastic surgery and starts enjoying the high life on a resort. But he starts to notice his wife isn't taking his calls, and as the weeks pass, the money depletes, and then he realizes that his wife has full-on disconnected the phone. This irritates Lou to no end.
Another beautiful sunset, eh, Senor Smith?
Lou decides to return home because his wife has the insurance money in order to find out what the fuck has been going on, and he is shocked.
What the fuck?
Is there something I can do for you?
The Trap is an episode that I slept on when I initially watched the series, and upon going back, it is an instant fucking classic. The cast is great, and it was directed by Michael J. Fox, I think just before his Parkinson's diagnosis, and it's a shame because he's a great director. The character of Lou Paloma is such a prick, but it's fun to watch him be a prick, and when you get to the twist ending when you watch this episode, it's very satisfying. And on a side note, it perfectly captures how being on vacation for too long can suck. Anyway, let's get to number 3. The 6th episode of the 5th season, titled 2 for the Show, is arguably the best written Tales from the Crypt episode of all time. Like, if this list was based purely on story writing, this would be number 1, no doubt. Honestly, if you're going to put on any episode after you finish watching this video, it should be this one, because I'm not gonna give away too much on it, because it is fucking brilliant. The episode opens with a married couple eating dinner. While the husband, Andy Conway, keeps going on about his work, his wife becomes increasingly more irritated, before dropping a bombshell on him.
I'm leaving you, Andy.
You know, if you want, I'll make a list of things for you to talk about. That way you won't... What?
His wife Emma is leaving him on the grounds that the passion has left their marriage and all Andy wants to talk about is work. Couple that with the fact that she's been having an affair and the marriage is pretty much over. And when Andy finds out he can't negotiate his way out of it, he decides the most logical thing to do is to strangle the bitch to death. Unfortunately, Andy can't even put enough passion into doing that because he doesn't finish Emma off and gets cut with scissors, only subduing her by accidentally stabbing her to death with her own scissors. Stop stabbing yourself. Meanwhile, at the police station that received the domestic disturbance call, there's a cop that is also having some sort of marital issues. I wonder if this'll come into play. Of course it comes into play. While Andy's trying to stuff his now deceased wife into a trunk, he gets a visitor at the door. And it's none other than Officer Fine. So Andy lets Officer Fine into his home. Officer Fine does the whole, we got a call about a domestic, that kind of shit. And he's looking around the place, and Andy's understandably panicked. And it's a nice little game of cat and mouse. And that's what this whole episode is a very well plotted out game of cat and mouse. You think Officer Fine's gonna find the body in the trunk, and then he doesn't. And then you see Andy just fucking strategically doing the bathtub. It's really good writing. Throughout the whole ordeal, you know Officer Fine knows Andy did it, but he's playing coy, and even plays Andy a little bit like a fiddle when he says more cops are gonna be coming. Andy tries to keep one step ahead of the cop by chopping up his wife and getting a ticket to Chicago. But while Andy may think he's one step ahead of Officer Fine is like 6 steps ahead.
Mr. Conway.
Andy lied about his wife being in Chicago and is further lying, saying that he's going there to work things out. But we all know he has the corpse in the trunk. Andy is not even safe on the train, as Officer Fine keeps pursuing him, and he's such a prick. I love this character. I specifically love how, at this point, you know that Officer Fine is aware Andy killed his wife, but he's like, if you were to kill your wife, how would you do it? He just fucks with them throughout this entire episode. Officer Fine just won't give Andy a break, and it makes this episode so good. Even on a rewatch, when you know what's gonna happen, it is very enjoyable. David Paymer, who played Andy, and Vincent Spano, who played Fine, they have a great on-screen chemistry. Not in the same way as Henriksen and Ty, but they play off each other really well, and it really keeps you guessing who's gonna come out on top in all of this. And yes, 2 for the show is basically Strangers on a Train, but when you get to the twist ending, it just throws everything for a loop, and it's truly a brilliant episode. I highly recommend you watch this one. Well, there's only 2 episodes that could possibly beat this one, so let's get to the first of those 2. Episode 3 of the 5th season, Forever Ambergris, follows 2 war photographers, Isaac, played by Steve Buscemi, and Dalton, played by Roger Daltrey, the singer of The Who. Isaac is Dalton's protege as a photographer, and Dalton is starting to notice that Isaac is actually getting better at the job than he is. This starts to actually affect him at work, where he's at risk of losing his job. Dalton has that evil look in his eyes as the duo are set to go on an assignment in Central America. Dalton attends dinner at Isaac's place, where he meets Isaac's girlfriend, Bobby, and you can tell he's already going to plot something to steal her away from him. And even after the dinner, while they're having wine, as soon as Isaac leaves the room, Dalton tries to throw the moves on her. Like, this is classic Tales from the Crypt shitbag. You already know something bad is gonna happen to this guy. So Dalton stays the night, and he hears Isaac and Bobby fucking, and for some reason he's compelled to go watch. Probably to take a look at Bobby's tits. And you already know what's coming. Tales from the cock! And what do you know, Bobby catches Dalton watching them in the act and seems genuinely off-put. Bobby comes out after to have her, I guess, after-sex cigarette, and Roger Daltrey tries to put the moves on her, and, it's kind of gross considering she's probably still filled with a load of hot Buscemi. But she turns him down, saying that while Isaac worships Dalton, she worships Isaac, thus shattering what may remain of Dalton's ego. The next day, the two head out to Central America with a group of mercenaries. The commander of the mercenaries tells Dalton of a village that was attacked by a bioweapon. Dalton sees this as a perfect opportunity to get rid of Isaac, and tricks Isaac into going there to take some pictures. I just want to say, Roger Daltrey is really good at playing a scumbag. He does the whole reverse psychology shit on Buscemi, and it's just great. Isaac separates from the group to go look at this village, and later that night, he wakes up in excruciating pain and is sick as a fucking dog. This episode presents one of the finer moments of body horror in Tales from the Crypt. There's a handful of them, but for the most part, body horror was kind of absent on this show, at least to this degree. So Buscemi's sitting there dying a very painful death, and Dalton decides to start taunting him and full-on admits that he sent him to the village on purpose because he wants Bobby for himself. Dalton is by far one of the worst people in the entire series.
There goes that wonderful eye of yours.
So the next morning, Dalton and the mercenaries are outside talking about what happened when all of a sudden Isaac shows up and he is completely decrepit and rotting. And he pulls a "you did this to me, Dalton." Dalton decides to grab one of the assault rifles off the men and blow Steve Buscemi to shit. Dalton, being the pile of shit that he is, steals Isaac's photos and passes them off as his own. And he gets great praise, and his career is reinvigorated because of it. And he even pays Bobby a visit after, and being Tales from the Crypt, you know it's not going to end well, but this is where the synopsis stops. Everything about Forever Ambergris works. It's got a strong cast, a good setting, a pretty good story, and the body horror is disgusting. This episode is very disgusting, so if you have a weak stomach, watch it anyway, don't be a bitch. Broaden your horizons. Before we move on to my number 1 pick, let's take a look at some honorable mentions. These honorable mentions are in no particular order. These are all episodes that I think are fucking great, and on any day, they could take the place of one of my top 12s, but I felt like I should mention them even though I won't be going into any detail. I'm not in any way insinuating that these in my top 12 are the only good Tales from the Crypt episodes. The series is full of classics. This is probably one of the hardest top 10s that I could ever imagine compiling, and the fact that I got this far into it is nothing short of a miracle. But when picking a favorite Tales from the Crypt episode, I have to really think, what episode embodies Tales from the Crypt as a concept and a series in the best way possible? What episode has that great classic Tales from the Crypt feel? What episode has a powerhouse lead? What episode is sleazy and violent? What episode do I like so much that it's causing me to needlessly build up and tease its reveal? For me, there is only one true definite favorite in Tales from the Crypt, and... You fucking whore! Okay, chill, I'm getting to it. In my opinion, the one undisputed best Tales from the Crypt episode is none other than... Season 6, Episode 7, The Pit. What embodies Tales from the Crypt more than a mixed martial arts story with Wayne Newton? And... what the hell? Hey, hang on a second. Hey, I'm trying to record something. What the fuck are you doing to my list? Your list? Fuck you, motherfucker. The fuck you just called me? I spent fucking 2 weeks working, you're in here fucking up with that god-awful Pit episode. Suck my fucking cock. What are you gonna post? How the fuck do you even exist? You know what? Fuck this shit. Hey, get the I'm gonna fucking kill you, motherfucker. Fuck off. Fuck you. Now, you fucking brought this on yourself, you piece of fucking shit. Get the fuck off me. Now, fuck you. You don't fuck with another man's hobbies. I'm gonna make sure you never fuck with one of my videos again. Nah, man. Please, don't fucking do it, man. Don't fucking... No! I'm very sorry you guys had to hear that. That was just the alternate universe version of me with bad taste. He's been dealt with, and I doubt he'll ever return. Now let's get on to the real number 1. The 11th episode of the 4th season, Split Personality, is without a doubt the greatest Tales from the Crypt episode ever made. And no doubt the largest contributing factor to this is Joe Pesci as the lead. It opens with Paulie from the Rocky movies at a blackjack table, and he's about to bust. But Joe Pesci convinces him to take the hit, and it turns out good. Pesci declines the offer of a cut of the cash, saying that Paulie should keep it for his kid's operation, but then throws out that he's aware of some low-risk, high-reward investments. He convinces Paulie to give him a check and lets Paulie keep the cash. And what does Vic do? He cashes the check immediately, gives the dealer a big fat tip because he was in on the swindle, and he fucks off. What a shitbag. To celebrate his swindle, Vic gets a hotel room and a high-class hooker. And you really get to see what kind of person Vic is when the hooker asks him if they're gonna fuck or if he's just gonna talk, and he reacts badly.
Shut up! Shut the fuck up! I pay you to be whatever!
Vic's one true desire before he quits swindling altogether is to get one last big score and to make it with twins. And one day, while driving in his BMW carelessly, he swerves to avoid hitting two cats, and this action alone makes him better than some of the other characters on this list. He pops a tire and decides to go up to a nearby house to use the phone. Did I mention Joe Pesci steals the fucking show?
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
So Vic just lets himself into the house to use the phone, and ladies and gentlemen, again, Joe Pesci.
That's just Sindeep's Blair. What a goofy looking fuck he was.
Vic is confronted by the woman who owns the house wielding a handgun because he's a trespasser. He tries to explain the situation, but then notices that she has an identical twin sister. And Vic decides to use his con man skills by praising their father's architectural work, despite the fact he was calling him a goofy looking fuck. Vic throws on the old Pesci charm to try and bang the two twins. And Vic starts to date the twins romantically. That's a weird term I used, I don't know why I did it, but hey, this is what happens when you don't script. And he even manages to slam both of them. Now at this point, any man would be happy to just walk away. You basically doubled down and won. When the twins say they don't want to share him and that it's not gonna work, Vic says that he has a twin brother who runs operations in South Africa half the time and they switch spots. This is literally just Vic dressing up as a fake brother. I see this going well. It actually starts off well. Vic manages to marry both the twins, one as himself and one under his fake brother persona. And he's living the big life in this billionaire mansion. Now, this whole scheme isn't because he's in love with the twins, it's because he wants their billion-dollar fortune. And he starts to get sloppy and the inconsistencies start to rack up. And the twins both mention the sunburn. Now, unlike the other episodes, I am going to spoil the ending to this, so if you don't want to see it, skip to the time code. The twins go through Jack's clothes while he's in the shower, and they find the fake ponytail. The jig is up, they know Vic has been playing them, and they are not happy. The twins leave a previously locked drawer open for Pesci to find, where he finds out that their father was killed and that they were the prime suspects, but they were acquitted. But that doesn't make them innocent, and they knock Pesci the fuck out. They chain Pesci up to the bed and explain that they did kill their father because they couldn't stand to share him. And they don't want to share Vic either. Now, up to this point, this episode's very tame, and usually when Tales from the Crypt starts tame, it more or less stays tame. There's exceptions, but this goes off the rails pretty quickly. The scene concludes with what I can consider to be one of, if not the most iconic image of the show, a scantily clad hot chick wielding a chainsaw. And I'm gonna leave with you in all its glory my favorite scene from the series.
Hey, get out of here with that! Are you crazy? Stop! Hey!
On the plus side, the twins get a happy ending. They each get their own Joe Pesci. Well, it's half a Joe Pesci, but it's still a Joe Pesci. I wish I had a Joe Pesci. You've reached the end of the spoiler section. What makes this episode stand out among the others is I can watch it, like, multiple times in rapid succession. It is just that fucking good. With the exception of 2 for the show, which was always going to be in the top 3, I couldn't really tell you where any of the episodes would have ended up 2 weeks ago when I started this video. However, it was an absolute certainty that Split Personality would be number 1. It's a prime example of Tales from the Crypt utilizing their lead to the best of their abilities. Joe Pesci is a fucking gem in this. He's so good at playing a sleazeball shitbag con man. The Citron twins are great as well. They obviously are good at talking in unison because they're twins, and they have this really good voice. It's kind of low, raspy, but monotoned. And it's creepy, but also kind of sexy at the same time.
A twin brother?
But they managed to keep the creepy twin element to a minimum until the very end of the episode. The story is no different from your standard Tales from the Crypt sleazebag episode, but it's executed so perfectly that it stands out among all of them. And fun fact, it was directed by Joel Silver, who is normally only a producer, and he's produced a lot of my favorite movies. But to this day, this is the only time he's ever sat in the director's chair, and he did a fucking good job of it too. All I have left to say is it's a great episode, and I think anybody who likes horror or Joe Pesci needs to watch it right now. Well, not right now, let me finish my video first, then go watch it. Tales from the Crypt first aired in June of 1989 and ran all the way till July 19th, 1996, 25 years ago. It wasn't the first show to do anthology horror, and it wasn't the last, but I personally think it is the greatest anthology horror series of all time. Mainly because it just had no boundaries, it could show pretty much anything. But it didn't go to ridiculous levels. It maintained that level of 80s horror where it could be creepy, but most of the time it was just fun to watch. And it showed that cable TV was truly the wave of the future. Now all the best shows are on cable, and we have Tales from the Crypt sort of to thank for that, because as far as I'm aware, it is one of the earliest forms of must-see TV on premium cable. With the exception of a good chunk of the 6th season and all of the 7th season, every season of this show is great, and it's awesome for a binge. Unfortunately, due to the copyright nightmare that is Tales from the Crypt, it's not likely we're ever going to get a reboot, at least not for the foreseeable future. Which is a shame, because HBO is gearing up to do some sort of 80s horror revival block, and a new Tales from the Crypt would be fucking dynamite on that. It isn't on any streaming service, but you can track down the DVDs, and a large majority of the episodes are on YouTube. So if you've never seen this show before, go and watch the entire fucking series. You will not regret it. This video is dedicated to the memory of producer Richard Donner, who passed away on July 5th of this year. It is also dedicated to the memory of producer David Giller, who passed away in December of 2020. Without them, it's possible that Tales from the Crypt may have never happened, and I will always be thankful for this show. I absolutely love it, and both of those producers will be missed. If you liked this video, hit that subscribe button, drop me a like, share me with your friends, or feel free to just flame me in the comments. Generation Y Entertainment, signing off.
Tales from the Crypt.